There we are.
You got it.
The meeting come to order, all right? And first order of business is the agenda approval.
Yeah, Mr. President, at the dais, staff presented a memo to the board with a couple of adjustments to two of the agenda items. One of them is for agenda item number 10. The staff report that was in the original packet had some references to a previous agenda. Those references have been removed, and you have now before you the corrected text for that item. And the other one is for the item on the budget. The budget tables were omitted from the staff report. Those have been provided to you with one small amendment, and that was to include the previously approved membership in the California Central Valley Flood Control Association has now been included in the budget table for consideration tonight.
Then I'll move for approval of the agenda as amended.
Been moved and seconded that the agenda be approved as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Public comment on matters not on the agenda.
Bill, closed session.
Whoops, I take it back. It's closed session. Jim?
Yeah, the board did meet in closed session to confer with its real property negotiator and to confer with legal counsel with regard to anticipated litigation. Under the first item, conference with real property negotiator, the board did take action to authorize a counteroffer to the Pake Trust. The board also took action on the Ainsley, ABS Southport, and Kubo parcels, which are listed under that agenda item, to authorize payment for a right of possession and use. And beyond that, no other action was taken under agenda item 1 on the closed session agenda. With regard to item 2, conference of legal counsel regarding anticipated litigation, action will be taken after the public hearing in open session under agenda item 10. That's it.
Thank you, Jim. I have nothing on public comment. Approval of the May the 14th, 2015 minutes.
Move approval?
I will second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes of May the 14th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Review of the monthly year-to-date revenue and expenses.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. President, and members of the board. This cash flow report is for the month of April 2015. The agency's combined starting position was $26 million approximately. Revenues from the state were approximately $200,000 related to final invoices from the RFMP Phase 1. Expenditures for the month were $1.4 million approximately. The largest expenditure for that was deposits to the state treasurer for the agency's ongoing condemnation cases. No other state revenues were received for the month, and the agency's closing position for the month of April was $25.3 million. That ends the report for this month.
No questions.
No questions.
Okay, questions?
Well,
No. No.
No questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Consent agenda.
Yes. Mr. Chair?
Item number 5, Jim.
Under item 5 on the consent agenda, there is going to be one modification. The parcel owned by the two Rogers trusts are going to be deleted from that and deleted from the resolution 150601.
Okay. I need a motion on the remainder of the consent agenda.
And I'll make a motion
I'll
for
second it.
approval of the consent agenda as adjusted.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the consent agenda be approved as suggested. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Number 10.
Item number 7.
No, 10.
10, item number 10. Public hearing on consideration of Resolution 150602, authorizing the eminent domain action to acquire real property for the Sacramento River Southport Early Implementation Project, Yolo County Assessors Parcel Number 046-030-008-000.
Chelsea, would you come me up? Good morning, President Denton, members of the WSAFCA Board. Today I will be presenting one resolution of necessity for the Sacramento Southport Early Implementation Project for your consideration. I'm going to discuss some of the goals for the Southport project, provide a brief overview of some of the decisions made to advance the project to its current design and the progress in the project, and then I'll present the information required for findings of a resolution of necessity. First and foremost, the Southport EIP project is a public safety project. WSAFCA's overarching goal for this project is to provide 200-year flood protection to the city and its residents with the least amount of harm to private property. Another goal is to design and construct a project to achieve 200-year flood protection that maximizes the use of local resources. Where we've been and where we're going. As you know, a problem identification report was completed for the entire project in 2008. That was followed in the following year. The alternatives analysis was developed to analyze known deficiencies and propose solutions to said deficiencies. And through this process, Southport was selected in 2010 to address significant levee deficiencies along the Sacramento River, one of the most vulnerable segments of the West Lip levee system. In 2011, a preliminary design report was completed which analyzed deficiencies and solutions to address those deficiencies. Now kind of more of where we are presently and where we're going. Since the final preliminary design report, the levee design has advanced from 15% to 65% to 90% complete. Village Parkway has advanced to 100% complete, and the bid package is scheduled for release in July. And the project team anticipates that the levee design will be completed this calendar year and bid out in early 2016. Just prior to the preliminary design report, staff presented to you, the board, the design decision hierarchy to help deliberate on solutions that address known deficiencies in the Southport area. So you may recall there were 3 combined measure alternatives put together, the first of which had adjacent levees with berms, an adjacent levee with cutoff walls. These berms were up to 200 feet. Then we also had a setback levee with berms. This included adjacent levee in the northern segment, setback levees through the middle of the project, and setback levee with cutoff walls, which also included a partial levee degrade. And the third one that was considered, or that was looked at to look at how do we deal with some of the various deficiencies in Southport, was a fix-in-place levee improvements with seepage berms generally. You may recall the team presented 2 guiding principles to select a preferred design alternative. First of those was to develop a project that provides the greatest amount of protection to the city as soon as possible. And the second was to minimize the effects on the community while achieving the first objective. The combined measures of adjacent levee with seepage berms, setback levee with seepage berm, and fix-in-place with seepage berm designs were assembled to produce two design alternatives. Both of these design alternatives were advanced to 15%. At the WSAFCA board meeting in January, not this past January, 2012. The project team presented two design alternatives that were which included various solutions to address the levee deficiencies. Alternative one had fix-in-place repairs with conventional cutoff walls in segment A and B, the southern end of the project, combined with setback levee beginnings in segment B through and behind Bees Lake and adjacent to the levee seepage berm in segment F, as well as an adjacent levee with a cutoff wall in segment G. Alternative two consisted of the same solutions for segments A, C, D, and E, A, C, D, E, and G, but excluded segments B and F. That was your call. And, excuse me. Hold on. All right. Staff came to you and asked for permission to proceed to 65% from 15% from both of these preferred design alternatives. Advancing segments A through G where both preferred alternatives had the same solutions in those segments. Value engineering studies for segments F and B were completed in May and of August 2012 per your direction. Based on the feasibility measures evaluated, impacts to private property, cost effectiveness, ability to maximize flood protection for Southport, the WSAFCA board directed the project team to integrate the preferred design alternative into the project design for segments B and F. And that's how we got to where we are today. So, necessary for us to bring a resolution necessity to fruition, we have to make findings. So there are 4 findings that we need to make. First, the public interest and necessity of the proposed project. Second, that the project is planned and located in a manner that is most compatible with the greatest public good and the least private injury. That the property is necessary for the project, and that an offer has been made to the owner of record. So, first and foremost, the Southport EIP project is a 5.8 mile-long project, which includes solutions to address known deficiencies, which include fix-in-place, with seepage berms, setback levee solutions, as well as some portion of adjacent levee with cutoff walls. It's been designed and has been analyzed to address known deficiencies in Southport, and it will be going to the BOSC, the Board of Senior Consultants, in the month of April in its current design. This design will provide 200-year flood protection, meeting state and federal standards. It will protect over 25,000 people and $4 billion in commercial businesses in the community. Without this project, residents and businesses continue to be at risk during a major flood event. So, the project is planned and proposed in a manner that is most compatible with the greatest public good and least private injury. As you know, it runs along the eastern bank of the Sacramento River, where we've identified significant deficiencies related to seepage and erosion. The project team evaluated a number of design solutions, all of which have come to you in a number of different fashions. You know, as we advance, we've gone through the analysis, through geotechnical evaluation, hydraulic evaluations, consultations with the resource agencies, with the Corps of Engineers. And the whole purpose of this is to improve public safety for the residents of West Sacramento, and specifically to Southport. the necessity of the property. So as you know, through this project, South River Road will no longer exist because the levee will be partially degraded. And to provide access to existing property owners, we have designed in Durham Village Parkway, which is in the city's general plan since 1990, to be developed as the replacement road for South River Road. The parcel that we're in question is the Saines parcel. It's approximately 3.15 acres, and it's located in the middle of segment F. For the construction of Village Parkway, the replacement road for South River Road, approximately 0.1 acres is needed for the construction of the parkway, and a lesser amount, about a quarter of that amount, is needed for a temporary construction easement to do that construction and to make sure that the construction activities don't interfere with the property, the rest of the property, and to act as a buffer. The last thing we need to make in our findings for the resolution necessity that the offer has been made to the owner of record. The WSAFCA Board approved the acquisition at the October 9, 2004 meeting. BRI, the city's right-of-way consultant, assembled the first written offer for Ms. Saines following the approval by the board, and a complete offer packet was organized, assembled, and mailed to Ms. Saines for the property acquisition on October 16th. That concludes my presentation for this resolution.
No, but I think they,
Any questions?
no.
No questions.
So this is a public
you.
hearing.
Yeah. I think he's got someone to speak here.
You're opening the public hearing.
We're opening the public hearing.
I'm sorry.
We're opening the public hearing
Yeah.
for this resolution.
We're opening the public hearing for this time. Resolution 150602.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Carl Schweikert. I'm here on behalf of the Sands, the property owners in question. There's no doubt that the board and BRI have done a lot of engineering work. I'm not here to dispute whether or not this is for a public purpose or not. The problem I have is that BRI has acted both as the agent to acquire the property and the valuer of the property, the appraiser of the property. And as such, we believe that appraisal is conflicted and is not a valid appraisal, meaning that the offer made is not valid under the government code because you haven't determined the fair market value because you have a conflicted party determining that fair market value. And it's not a question of what the dollar amount is. It's a matter of the conflicted nature. I realize that the dollar amount will be dealt with in a future point. And that's all we want to raise, is that there are 4 items you have to demonstrate to adopt the resolution of necessity, and our stance is that item number 4 has not been met due to a conflict of interest by your acquisition agent. Thank you.
Thank you. We have item number 11.
No, does anybody else want to speak?
Well, does anybody else want to speak?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
If staff or whoever could direct, I'm under the impression that BRI does have independent appraisers perform the appraisals. Is that correct?
So I'm not going to speak to the legality of this because I'm not qualified to do so. However, the way that BRI conducts its business is that it has a right-of-way agent which is actively negotiating, an appraiser who operates in the profession of being an appraiser. And for all appraisals that are over $25,000, they go to a third-party appraiser for review. That is not the case in this particular case. This is not that. The amount of compensation does not reach that threshold in this particular case, but that's how the business is operated.
But they do contract with independent appraiser,
They have internal appraisers.
internal appraisers, okay. No. So we need to vote on the, what? We need to vote on the,
Close the public hearing.
let's close the public hearing.
Close the public hearing. Bill.
We'll close the public hearing. And we need to vote on the
Now we have a discussion if we have the,
consideration of 150602. I need a motion on it.
I have, I have no comments.
well then, I'll make the motion for that, for approval of Resolution 150602.
I'll second it. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Presentations. Army Corps of Engineers.
Good morning, President Denton, members of the board. Name's Eric Nagy with MBK Engineers, and I'm a program management and engineering consultant to WSAFCA. I'm here today to provide an informational briefing about the Army Corps of Engineers periodic inspection of the levee system that includes providing protection to the city of West Sacramento. In this presentation, I plan to cover really three things: a brief overview of the program itself, some information about the inspection process and the results, and to discuss consequences and next steps. The Army Corps of Engineers initiated a levee safety program in 2006, largely as a result of Hurricane Katrina. And this program is intended to assess the integrity of levee systems across the country. While it may seem that this has always been part of the Corps' mission, it has never been organized and orchestrated the way it is since 2006 under this program. Part of the program is to conduct periodic inspections of flood risk reduction systems across the entire nation on a 5-year cycle. And in 2014, an inspection of your levee system was conducted by the Corps, and this was the first time a periodic inspection had been conducted on your levee system. Periodic inspections are different than the annual inspection process and even the quarterly inspection process that has historically been required either by the Corps or by the Department of Water Resources in the partnership that you have with them for the flood risk reduction system protecting the city. Periodic inspections have essentially three primary focal points. One is to verify proper operations and maintenance. A second is to evaluate the structural stability of that system. And third is to assess its overall condition. Finally, one of the key aspects of the periodic inspection and really the consequence of the periodic inspection is currently the periodic inspection is the the primary indicator of whether you as a local agency are eligible for rehabilitation assistance by the federal government after a declared disaster. Let's start with the levee system that was inspected as part of this process. I believe Chelsea has provided you a couple of maps. The map that's on the screen is certainly pretty small and will be difficult for the audience to read, but you have a larger version in front of you. The Corps conducts their inspections on levee systems that the entire system together has to work successfully to protect the lands behind those levees. And so the Corps thinks a little differently about this levee system protecting the city of West Sacramento than we have historically. The levee system that is illustrated on that map extends well beyond the city limit in the south portion of the city. The city limit is roughly coincident with the South Cross levee, and this levee system that was inspected as part of this process extends south of the South Cross levee all the way down to Minor Slough and encompasses the area that includes Clarksburg. This process, these levee systems are often split into segments, what are called segments. And this particular segment, which has well over 100 miles of levee, has been divided into 16 segments. These segments are often coincident with the levee maintaining agency that's responsible for their care. So as you look at this levee system, it's easy and quick to recognize that there are 7 separate and distinct levee maintaining agencies that are responsible for the levees that comprise this system. For the city of West Sacramento, those maintaining agencies are obviously RD 537, RD 900, the Department of Water Resources, which has maintenance area 4, as well as part of the Sacramento bypass, and finally, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers themselves as a maintainer of the navigation levee on the west side of the Deepwater Ship Channel. And then there are 3 additional local maintaining agencies south of the South Cross levee, which are listed here on the slide. The inspection is based on 15 inspection criteria. 7 of these criteria are used to determine disaster eligibility or disaster rehabilitation eligibility. And so while when you look at the summary of results, and we'll get to that in a second, a subset of the total table of results is what is used to determine eligibility under PL 8499, or what's commonly referred to as PL 8499, but really just disaster rehabilitation assistance. The process is such that each criterion receives one of 3 possible ratings: acceptable, marginally acceptable, or unacceptable. Each of those 15 criterion are applied to each levee segment, and then each levee segment is aggregated into the system rating. So you could kind of think of it as a sort of a feeder system or a pyramid. All those criterion are applied to every segment's added together into the system. It only takes one unacceptable rating on one criterion to have the entire system be found unacceptable. And so you really have to have a perfect scorecard in order to have an acceptable system rating. And so that kind of plays into, that sort of sets the context for the summary, the overall summary of results that I'll discuss in a second. A little bit about the process before I get to the results. The inspection was conducted in August of 2014. The Corps' consultant issued a draft inspection report in January of this year. All of the local maintaining agencies were invited to an outbriefing with the Corps and the Central Valley Flood Protection Board staff in April. And that outbriefing fell within a 60-day comment period that the local levee maintaining agencies had to comment on the draft report that was released to them approximately mid-March. That comment period closed on May 20th. This slide shows and is a summary table that I extracted directly from the draft inspection report. And again, for the folks in the audience, this is difficult to read. The board members, I believe you have a copy in front of you. You don't really need to be able to read it to know that red is bad. And one red block would be enough to fail the system. And there are plenty of red blocks. So the math really is pretty easy. From the standpoint of the criterion that determine eligibility for disaster assistance, those are essentially the criterion that fall roughly at the top half of the table. And the bottom half of the table are the criteria which do not affect your rating. So if you recall, over the past several years, there's been a tremendous stir about vegetation and vegetation on levees, and how the Corps had instituted a policy that was difficult, if not impossible, to comply with. Vegetation falls below that line. So if your only problem was vegetation, your system could be found acceptable and you could be eligible for disaster assistance. That's just an example of one that falls below the line. The type of stuff that falls above the line is animal control or rodent control, erosion, closure structures, encroachments. These are examples of criterion that are above the line. If this table applies to the entire levee system that was inspected, if you, and so all of the segments are shown up there. There are a subset of segments that apply to the city itself. 9 of the 16 apply to West Sacramento. And when you look at the ratings for those particular levee segments, you see that the most significant issues are related to animal control. 5 of the segments were found unacceptable. 5 of the 9 were found unacceptable for animal control. Erosion, 2 of the 9 segments were found unacceptable. Encroachments, 4 of the 9 segments were found unacceptable. And closures, 1 of the segments was found unacceptable for closures. This next table synopsizes the results in a different way. And what it does is it aggregates all of those blocks, regardless of inspection criteria, into each levee or local maintaining agency. And really the intent here is to show how, from a levee system perspective, these results lay out from the standpoint of the levees that are within the city limit or are the city limit, and separates those results from those south of the city in the areas protecting Clarksburg. Really, the big takeaway from this slide is that the levee system, 15 of the 16 segments in the levee system failed with an unacceptable rating, and for the city itself, 8 of 9 segments had an unacceptable rating. The silver lining here is that board member Ramos's district, RD 537, had the only levee segment that had a passing rating of marginally acceptable. From the standpoint of consequences, I've already outlined that one of the key aspects of the periodic inspection program is to determine rehabilitation assistance after a disaster. And currently, WSAFCA enjoys an eligible rating. At the time that this inspection report is finalized, you will have an ineligible rating for disaster assistance, and I'll talk about what we can do about that under next steps. And so it's really a fairly easy cause and effect relationship here. An unacceptable rating results in an ineligible disaster assistance determination. While these obviously are grave findings and troubling for anybody that hears them, you're in good company. Essentially, every levee system in the Central Valley that has undergone this process, with very, very few exceptions, have had the exact same results. I don't have the exact numbers, but I could tell you that it is a strong, strong majority of levee systems have resulted or had the same findings made by the Corps in the periodic inspection process. So I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about next steps and what can be done to counteract this, particularly from the standpoint of rehabilitation assistance. As I mentioned earlier, there was a 60-day comment period on the draft report. MBK, in cooperation with WSAFCA staff, developed comments on the draft report, and we submitted that within the comment period. That action is complete. From the Corps' point of view, they will be presenting the inspection results for this inspection to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board next month. And then that is sort of the last step in the process prior to them issuing a final inspection report, which is currently scheduled for August. Essentially, the only thing that would change that August completion date is if something is determined between now or through the presentation to the board process that would cause the Corps to reconsider any of their findings, but that's fairly unlikely. One of the actions that has been ongoing for a while, and it's relevant to this particular process and issue, is seeking a non-federal rehabilitation program eligibility finding for the South Cross Levee. We have asserted through our hydraulic analysis that the South Cross Levee is a feature that allows this levee system to be bifurcated or divided, essentially, into two components. What that does is it allows, a bifurcated system allows WSAFCA to have much more ability to essentially control its own destiny. Right now, you and all of your member agencies could be doing an outstanding job of maintaining your levee system. It could be found acceptable, and you might be found ineligible for rehabilitation assistance if a levee maintaining agency south of the city is struggling to get an acceptable rating. And so we're in the process of working with the Corps to divide the levee system into two components. And so and that division would occur at the South Cross Levee. So that's underway. When that is approved by the Corps, then the next step would be for the board to submit a letter of intent to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and the Corps to develop a system-wide improvement framework. This is a policy that the Corps put in place a couple of years ago. It allows for local levee maintaining agencies to enter into an agreement with the Corps that basically is along the lines of the letter of intent commits to developing a plan to correct the deficiencies identified through the periodic inspection process. And once the plan is jointly approved by the Corps, the state, and you as the levee maintaining agency, then annually you submit a status report that shows progress in addressing or resolving the deficiencies identified through the process. As long as your system-wide improvement framework is in place and progress is being made, the Corps allows for a eligible determination for disaster assistance. One point I should note here is when we talk about disaster rehabilitation assistance, I should be clear for you and for the record that the Corps will always flood fight. during the disaster itself, they will always provide assistance to avoid a flood, a catastrophic levee failure from occurring. When we talk about assistance or disaster rehabilitation assistance, we're talking specifically about the program that comes in after a flood and helps repair damages as a result of that flood. So if there were a levee failure, if there's extensive locations of erosion along your levee system, historically the Corps has come in at 100% federal cost and repaired the system to the pre-flood condition. That is what we're talking about in terms of eligible or ineligible for you as a levee maintaining agency and your member agencies. The recommendation would be to submit the letter of intent upon the report being finalized, and the Corps would process that letter of intent. The letter of intent, the commitment is relatively minor in that you're only committing to develop the framework itself. You're not committing to actually implement the framework. That's a step that would come a year or two later. But from the time of submitting the letter of intent, you would be, your eligibility status would be changed. And with that, I have no further slides, and I'm happy to address your questions.
Questions? No, other than we just need to keep moving forward and doing our job. And appreciate the report.
Thank you very much. Good report.
Thank you.
Project updates.
Well, Mr. President, members of the board, I'll just go through a few of the highlights that were contained in the progress report that you received. Under the finance section, after the second distribution of the flood assessment, we're continuing to see the additional increase of approximately 5%. That's both from the 2% adjustment plus the corrections to the flood assessment that occurred last year. For the Southport project, last month, the final EIS was released and posted for a 30-day public review period towards the end of May. We have also posted a link to that final EIS to the WSAFCA website. Once that 30-day review period is complete, plus completion of the programmatic agreement with for cultural resource consultation, those are the two outstanding items that remain for the 408 package. So once those two items have been completed, then district will be sending the 408 package to division for review, and then again up to headquarters for review. Last month, we received the final BO from NIMS. And as you recall, we received the final BO from U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a couple of months ago. And that was a combined BO for both the Southport project and the GRR. The BO we received for NIMS is specific only to the Southport project. So we're still working with NIMS on the BO for the GRR. For the programmatic agreement and the cultural resource consultation, we have two separate consultations that are ongoing. One for the Village Parkway project and one for the Levee project. The draft PA for the Levee project has been reviewed by both SHPO and the tribe, and we've received comments from both. Response to comments are being prepared, and we will present those response to comments to the meeting that is scheduled with the tribe next week on June 17th. In support of the cultural resource consultation for the Village Parkway project, pedestrian surveys were completed second and third weeks of last month. Summary of findings, an associated record survey was prepared and submitted to the Corps on June 3rd, and then that report was forwarded to the tribe for their review on June 5th. Once we receive review and comment from the tribe, then that report will go to SHPO, and then we'll be able to execute some form of agreement which we anticipate to be finding of no effects for the Village Parkway package. And we're looking at mid-July, mid to end July for both of these to be completed. On environmental services in support of the Southport project, SCS engineers completed soil sampling on remaining agricultural parcels. We're expecting lab results at the end of the month. Results from sampling at the Barrow 1 site have been received. There is some residual pesticides above the health screening levels. The results of that sampling are being incorporated into a risk assessment that's being prepared by SCS to determine if and the extent of the contaminants and whether special precautions are necessary during construction to protect workers. That risk assessment is being finalized as we speak, and it should be shared with the team for our review in the next week or so. At the last board meeting, the board selected and approved a contract with Parsons Brinkerhoff to provide CM services for the Southport project, for the levee portion of the project. We're currently working with them to finalize the contract, complete all insurance requirements before issuing a notice to proceed. The first task order will include the review of the 90% PS&E deliverables in July. Staff completed the review of the 100% PS&E package for Village Parkway in late May. We provided comments back to the design engineer. We anticipate the final package will be ready for bid in early July. With regard to funding agreements with the state, decision memos for both the EIP amendment and also the UFR piece of the Southport project were both executed by DWR at the end of May. Currently, our EIP funding agreement amendment is being routed through DWR legal and the contracts offices. We expect to receive a draft for our review and comment in the next couple of weeks. And for the UFR component, we are on track to submit the complete application by the end of June. So about 70% of the funding is coming under EIP, about 25% of the funding is coming from the UFR. For the Rivers Erosion site, we have received the streambed alteration agreement. WSAFCA has executed our portion of the State Lands Commission lease. It is now with State Lands for their execution. The 401 permit by the Regional Water Quality Control Board should be approved hopefully the end of this week, if not early next. And then the last piece that we're working with is the 408 permit. Central Valley Flood Protection Board provided that package to the Corps. The Corps is trying to complete the review. They request some additional information relative to hydraulic considerations that went into design. We hope to have that question answered for them quickly so that we can get the 408 permission complete, and then it goes back to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, currently scheduled for the July 24 meeting for approval of that project. Once approved, we'll be going to construction in the fall, August, September. And then new to report under floodplain administration, the SB 5 components, which have to do with floodplain management of the general plan, those portions of the general plan update were presented to the Planning Commission on May 21 and they're scheduled to go to the City Council for adoption on June 17th. And then just an update on our emergency preparedness from the Round 1 grant that we received. The team has continued to provide presentations on the flood contingency mapping tool that the board saw last month. It has been presented to the Northern California Catastrophic Flood Response Planning meeting that was held on May 20th. Was also presented to Corps, DWR, Flood Protection Board, leadership staff, also to the Bay Area Floodplain Managers Association, and senior fire emergency response plans, fire EMONS personnel staff earlier this month, last week, and also to the DWR Flood Management Division staff also last week. And under the Regional Flood Management Plan 2.0, or Round 2, Phase 2, draft work plan has been developed. Our plan is to submit that to DWR for approval by tomorrow. And that completes my update. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
The only question I have is, do we have an update in future meetings? And what would those be, so that the public knows now, and we need to make sure we get that on our website or whatever?
Yeah, so staff is requesting to change the regularly scheduled meeting for July to Wednesday, July 15th. That's primarily due to board availability and also in consideration of the July 4th holiday. So in that board meeting, we're proposing to be scheduled on the 15th, regular session at 10 a.m.
Okay.
If there be nothing else, then the meeting is adjourned.